I'm Sharon Bill. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I thought it would be a good idea to have a chat about the whole acoustic versus digital piano debate. And really, I think that's an impossible question. It reminds me of the old-fashioned saying or question, how long is a piece of string? It's an impossible question. Is it this piece of string? Is it this piece of string? Is it this piece of string? How long? It's an impossible scenario that we're trying to answer. And I suppose in a purist sense, of course the answer is acoustic, the whole name of the instrument, the pianoforte, which just means soft, loud. That's the clue, I guess, that really the real thing is an acoustic piano because it's a hammer action with strings that creates that loud or soft tone that the whole piano revolves around. That's the instrument. However, you can see here, or perhaps you can't, I don't know, my piano is actually a digital. And so I suppose I ought to switch it on for future reference. And so that obviously shows that there are points for discussion to consider here. And so I'm reminded of a friend of mine who, when she was learning, she's an amazing pianist, sort of concert pianist, and as she was learning to play, she was actually forbidden to even touch a digital piano for most of her formative sort of practice years. And actually, out of interest, I've only ever had 2 artist strops in my whole life. It's not something I'm particularly proud of. However, it was just one of those, well, 2 of those occasions where it just sort of burst out of me. The first one was when we were getting married. We were getting married in our local church, and I was kind of the organist there. They got a very basic pipe organ. I don't know if there was just 1 manual or 2. Goodness, I can't remember now. However, nobody really played it except for me. It didn't seem to fit with their current mandate. They didn't want the pipe organ to be there any longer. They were going to keep the pipes just for sort of show. They had those nicely painted up, but they were going to rip out the pipe organ because maintenance just didn't seem worth the cost. It's quite sad, really, isn't it? But I do remember throwing an absolute strop, and I just said, you cannot rip out this organ. I am not walking down the aisle to an electric keyboard. A friend of mine was going to play the organ for us, and he was playing marvellous pieces like the War March of the Priests and so on. And it's like, he cannot play that on an electric keyboard. So that was one. And then the second time I had a bit of an artist strop was when I was a student. One of the projects that we had to do was create an arrangement of an orchestral piece or a piece of music for us to play as a group in one of our concerts, and it was I chose the second movement of the famous Rachmaninoff piano concerto, and we were trying to play that. I'd written it for 2 pianos and the various instruments we got in the group. I think a couple of clarinets and I can't remember some other bits and bobs. And so I was playing part of the piano part, and for the concert we were using a digital piano, or at least for rehearsals, and it was like, I cannot play this instrument because it was just giving nothing back to me, trying to play this most beautiful piece of music, and the instrument just wasn't giving me anything. And so actually, I'm really lucky they did actually bring in and hire in a piano for me for that. So, you know, there is a difference. Although in fairness, I will say that back then digital pianos were not very good. And so really life's all about compromise. It's all about finding what your priorities are. You know, it's bearing in mind things like the cost of the instrument, the cost of tuning, the inconvenience of tuning or having an out of tune piano. Space is an issue as well. So obviously it's about priorities and compromise. And so I think as well it's also important to just bear in mind that buying the best instrument, the most expensive instrument, does not make you the best musician. If you can afford it, then great, and just make sure that you merit that purchase, but that won't necessarily make you a better musician. And there's that old sort of saying as well, a bad workman blames his tools. I think if you're a good musician, you can get the most out of each instrument. So you can't use a bad instrument as an excuse all the time. However, there are limitations. So, it's that compromise again, isn't it? I've always got this sort of voice of conscience in my head that won't let me just go out and splurge and buy. I always feel like I have to wait until I've earned it, until I've got that merit. So, there's lots of points to consider there. Practicality and convenience are also big issues. We can't always just lug a grand piano around, even if we could afford one. At the end of December, I'm playing in a remembrance not concert, just like a little remembrance service, really, at a local funeral directors who, they put it on this little service for people who've recently been bereaved, because as you know, of course, my dad died not long ago. So there are a lot of people in this position, so they're putting on a little sort of service. And they've asked if I can play some Christmas carols for the service. Yes, of course I will. And they haven't got an instrument for me to play, and space is going to be an issue. It's not going to be a massive venue or anything. And so what I'm going to have to do, I've managed to borrow a little keyboard, and all of my artistic sensibilities are repelled by this instrument. However, that's the instrument that I've got. I can easily throw it in the car, and surely that's better than no music at all. So, we can see how there's always so much to think about. Just bear in mind that a keyboard is not the same thing as a digital piano. It's not the same thing at all. In many ways, for example, the hammer action of the keys, the digital piano aims to reproduce the hammer action of an acoustic piano, reflecting the movement of the strings and the hammer striking the keys, whereas a keyboard, for example, even if it says touch sensitive, you push for extra pressure. It's not to do with the hammer action. The keys aren't weighted either. So you've got no scope for dynamics apart from turning the volume up and down. There's no range of dynamics, there's no crescendo and so on. And also there's no range of notes. You've just not got enough notes on a keyboard, so you're very restricted into the amount of notes that you can play. So I would suggest that an old piano, even a clapped out old piano, is kind of better than a keyboard. You can get them free to a good home. They're on all sorts of second-hand websites, eBay and so on. I've had quite a lot of pianos in my lifetime, all of them kind of old. I've never really had a top-notch piano until very recently, when my husband bought me this. This is kind of my forever piano, and it's taken me a long time to feel like I can justify the purchase. I'm not sure I even do now, to be honest. Let me think about the pianos that I've had. So when I first started playing as a child, we had a dreadfully old piano. I think it was one of those free to a good home, and it was all walloped in white emulsion. Somebody's back in that was before shabby chic was trendy, and I don't think it was a trendy job. I saw in the paper once. It was like a converted pianola, sort of £750. It was a great massive thing, and because the cabinet was so deep, because it was a converted pianola, the tone was marvellous. And my piano tuner back then, he helped me to renovate it on a bit of a budget, and so I enjoyed that for a while. But it really was a massive piece of furniture in the house, and with 3 young kiddies running around and so on, we just didn't have the space for it at the time, and it wasn't really like a posh grand piano. So that went to Romania. Actually, we donated that to Romania in the end. Then I found an absolute bargain of a piano on eBay. One night in one of my insomniac phases, I found this piano and we did it up. I think I only paid about £60 for it. It was an absolutely amazing piano, and my husband helped clean that up and do it up, and I was really sorry to see that go. That was my last piano before this. My kids are utterly fed up of moving pianos, by the way. And And a friend's got that now, so I'm really glad that it's still somewhere that I can have a little go of it now and then. So that's gone to a good home, and then my husband bought me this, so we'll get to this in a moment. But you know, again, it's a question of your priorities. You may not be willing to sacrifice your dining table for the sake of a piano. I was quite happy living in a flat as we were students, and we just sort of lugged the piano up the stairs into the flat, and I was quite willing to sort of work around it. But then, you know, with 3 kids and so on, I felt that really that wasn't my priority at the time. So maybe if you're not willing to sacrifice your dining table and you're just getting started, a keyboard will just get you started. And yes, it's not the same thing, but surely it's better than nothing at all. At least you can practice, and then if you really get into your subject, which I hope that you would do, then you might feel like, well, I want more out of this, and then you merit the purchase or you merit the rearrangement of your furniture to then have this piano. And so I've said that yes, an acoustic piano, an old acoustic piano, is better than a keyboard if you can juggle that. However, now we come to my piano, and I said before, you know, when I had my artist strop, it was because the digital piano just wasn't giving me anything at all. Actually, I did have a Yamaha digital piano. It's sort of how long ago was that? About 10, 15 years ago. And it was a decent digital piano. It wasn't top notch, but it was pretty good. And so my daughter's got that now. I've given that to her when she got married, because I'd got that acoustic piano. So I decided I could do without one. I only needed one piano really. And so it was only recently that I've moved to this digital Kawai. I don't know if you can see there, Kawai. I absolutely love it. I just so fell in love with this instrument, and it's not an acoustic, but you know, it's so close, it's so clever. It's like magic what they've managed to do. And so the benefits of this, the compromise and losing perhaps that tiny purist quality for the sake of digital. For me, a piano is bashed all the time. It's played every single day. It's got all sorts of pupils. It's got enthusiastic kids giving it a good old bash. It's got me practicing it, and it's got, you know, such a lot of use. So for me, tuning was a real issue, and I might pay for tuning regularly, but it'd soon be out of tune again. And so the fact that I don't have to have it tuned is a massive plus for me. And then another thing, it's so clever what they've managed to do in recreating the effects of an acoustic piano. So it's got the hammer action weighted keys. It's actually got grand piano key function, where there's just a little sort of first movement before you then get the whole tone. And so actually, when you really give it a belting chord, what you get, I can actually feel the vibration of the strings on my fingers. How's that even possible? Because there are no strings. And even more cleverly than that, so normally when you use the sustain pedal, and on an acoustic piano it moves the dampener away from the strings to let the strings keep resonating, you get a little bit of movement in the cabinet, and you can usually hear a bit of a clunk or a bit of an echo from the strings resounding. Now, I don't know if you'll hear this, but if I give it a really good press down, you can actually hear the movement of strings. I'll do it again. Don't know if the mic will pick that up. It's actually making a movement, like a sound of movement of strings echoing. There are no strings in there. It's digital. It's like, that's really clever. And it's a convincing little effect. And actually on the back of the piano behind, there is actually an acoustic soundboard. So although there aren't strings and hammers and so on, there is actually a small amount of natural acoustic in the cabinet, as well as the digital reproduction. So that's pretty clever. And then, of course, because it's digital, I've got this added bonus of an absolute plethora of piano sounds. This is my favourite one. It's sort of a grand piano. It's sort of a mellow, but there's a tinge of brightness, there's a tinge of attack. And this is where I can get really, really luxurious. So if a pupil's taking an exam, I change the piano sound. Let me just find it. Here we go. And I change it to an upright. So they get to practice on a piano that's quite a similar sort of tone to the one they'll be playing for their exam. And also it's good to change piano sound because it just throws you a little bit, so it just gives you a bit of preparation for your exam nerves. So I can do that. And then there's the absolute added luxury where I choose a certain piano sound if I'm playing a romantic piece, which has got a more mellow tone, and then I'll change it to a different sound if I'm going to be playing particularly a classical piece like this Haydn piano sonata that I'm playing or practicing, and so I'll get a crisper tone. And this is where I've now got the luxury of several pianos in this one housing, whereas before that would be in the realm of, you know, the professionals. I know Mitsuko Uchida, she's a really famous pianist. She's quite old now. I think she's in her 70s. And she was kind of the pianist who I sort of referred to in my student days when I was practicing piano sonatas. She was kind of the authority. And I believe that she has 2 pianos. One purely is reserved for nothing but Schubert because it's just the right tone for Schubert. You know, and that's just mind-blowing that I can have a sort of a reflection of that just here in my own home. And so finally, after all these years, with grateful thanks to my hubby for buying this for me, after lots and lots of years of waiting, I've got my forever piano. But that's been a long journey where I've had to take lots of compromise and lots of make do along the way. So at the end of the day, so long as you're making music, it's all good. I hope that's been helpful to you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.